few areas here and there. In all honesty, as far as you're concerned, Millie, did the 11th Parliament really live up to that expectation? And if not, what can the 12th Parliament do to up their game?
Well, I think in that regard that the President was just being diplomatic.
And being kind.
Yes, very, very kind. Because I think across the board, everybody has agreed that the 11th Parliament was a disaster. In as far as legislation is concerned. The few legislations that came from there were all subjected to court processes because they were not done properly. They seemed to be going against the Constitution. They seemed to be done without the proper processes being applied.
Half-baked.
Half-baked.
To beat constitutional deadlines.
Exactly. And then, of course, very painfully so, they refused to pass the two-third gender rule legislations, you know, as well, a number of times, despite the Speaker even bringing back the debate to the House, using his powers to be able to bring it back. They were unable to do that. So I think there's really very, very little to say positively about that Parliament. But I think in the spirit of reconciliation and handshake, the President was trying to be kind. But I hope that this time round, now that the politics will always be there, but now that it's taking a back seat, taking its rightful place, because it should not be in the front seat in the first 3 years of Parliament's life. By then, they should be concentrating on delivering on their promises and on realizing the mandates of the institutions that they sit in. That hopefully this time round, we may be able to have legislations that address this. Just in the papers today, there's concern that in one of the commissions that they have decided to make the members permanent, the SRC, and there's concern about that. Now, hopefully that is something that Parliament would have, and it's come by way of a miscellaneous amendment, that they would have had a lot of conversation about, because we know that there's a lot of interest around the fifth, also the fourth arm of government, so-called, which is the independent commissions, how you constitute them and what you do about it. We remember a couple of years back when SRC proposed that their terms be made full-time, there was quite a lot of discussion nationally about that and whether that is the direction we wanted to go.
As a nation,
Yes, so for that amendment to have been sneaked in
as a miscellaneous amendment,
would make you question whether this Parliament is going to do what we anticipate of them, unless we have members of the Fourth Estate and civil society continuously reminding them to play their role and mulikering whenever they are not playing their role. Yes.
Getting to the handshake now.
Yes.
Because it found itself even to Parliament and even through their address, there is a concern, and it was rather loud as we relate with political commentary on it. And there are those that said, okay, so what becomes the role of opposition? Is it to agree with government? Is it, you know what, we need to jump, and you ask how high? So let's just clear the air in as far as that is concerned. One, is it okay for the nation to view this handshake from a political point of view, as much as it has political figures right on the top?
I think that that is a mistake right there. The two gentlemen were very clear in having that handshake, that it was for the bigger good of the nation, and it had very little to do with the politics of the day, and a lot less to do with the politics of 2022. Now, of course, you can't completely remove the politics from it, as you've said, because they were political figures. They are political figures still. It's very hard to remove that. But it is important for us to remember one thing, that the way the Constitution is currently structured, we have a majority and minority, not opposition per se, where you have the majority party and the minority party, and their interests may sometimes align, may sometimes not align. And the entire parliament is supposed to be a single unit. It's supposed to be a single unit pushing the agenda of the House. And that is why we would question, even last time, that when you form a parliamentary committee and it does not have members from the other side, how then do you say it is properly constituted? How do you begin a process of electoral law amendments when it is constituted in a manner that you cannot describe? It is totally outside Parliament, because we expect Parliament, once they go in there, to act as a single unit, with the minority ensuring that they add value to the process that the majority will lead. The majority will, in most cases, be presenting bills on behalf of the executive, because they are the majority, they are forming the executive. But the minority will, in most cases, be representing the views or the input from, say, civil society and other actors. So looking at Parliament acting that way, it is not necessarily the opposition kind of mentality that we had before we had the 2010 Constitution. So to confuse the handshake as now having no opposition, I think would be a mistake, because once you're able to remove the unnecessary or undue fights, then you're able to completely check each other. I think I have seen members of from the minority side play their role within Parliament, even after the handshake, questioning and pushing their colleagues from the majority side to try and ensure that they address in a more holistic manner the interests of all wananchi and not just the interests of the government. Because sometimes the government interests may not completely embrace wananchi interests. So I've been seeing them try to do that, and that does not say that the handshake is not working. The handshake was to ensure that we are able to have politics happening without everything grinding to a stop, without people like me every time you go to some of your clients telling you, wacha tuangalie hii maneno inaende in which direction.
Wacha tuone venye kutaenda.
Tuone vile kutaenda, you know, so that life can move on, so that people can continue to work, so that people can do things while politics continues to be politics that is expected.
And if I may wear my analyst's hat a bit, is I think also it's proper we understand that government has a modeling role to play, an opinion shaping role to play. And opposition is still government. But as much as they will keep the government in check, that can be done in two ways. They can do that within government, or they could do that outside government. I think what has just happened is that they've just come in and we will keep you in check, but we will be together in this journey of rebuilding the nation. However, Millie, the 14-member committee now will have the first sitting this week to deliberate on the 9-point agenda. To begin with, these 14 members, the persona and the formation of who they are, you started by saying they don't inspire a lot of confidence. Why so?
Well, the comments that have been going around media since the names were released was that, well, nothing earth-shaking. You know, there was this interest, I think largely amongst Kenyans, to see radical persons being brought there. If you would have, for example, seen Professor Makau, Nelson Havi, you know. I'm just giving extreme examples, you know, of people who have been known to be very radical and very firm in their stance, and people who will push for change, irrespective of what input or what opinions other people may have, that they will stand firm by what they believe and push for that agenda. That is what I think people anticipated with this handshake. But I think in the true spirit of the handshake that we're being reminded of, we have people like Amos Wako. If you remember Amos Wako, right from the days when he was Attorney General, was always seen. There was a time when the media named him the smiling.
The smiling AG.
Yes, the smiling AG. He was always very amenable, you know, very accommodative. Even in those days when opposition was facing very difficult times, he tried to find this, to make these decisions that were not too difficult for either sides to swallow. So that is he was closer to what we remember of the Solomonic decisions of Marende when he was speaker. So I think that in itself, and most of the other actors being there, having been people engaged in peace initiatives around the country, in reconciliation, in bringing people together, in getting people to sit down and talk. Now, you know that in Kenya, there's been a growing and persistent frustration with this thing of let's talk, let's discuss, because people keep saying that we have talked and discussed for very many years and we need action. Let's have justice. Let's see people's heads rolling if these talks are going to translate into anything meaningful. Therefore, when you see again these people who have been largely well respected, largely people who we will remember, and the kind of people whom, if may God give them long life, but if they were to pass away, there would be only glowing tributes being said about them, because they've generally been people who bring people together. When you see these people being brought in this process, then you may begin to fear that the justice that we have been calling for, the true change to the systems, the true address of all these problems that we know what they are, that have been taking us down that path, being addressed, begin to look a little bit less likely. But I like the fact that even with that, Kenyans have again been giving them the benefit of the doubt. That let's wait and see once they begin unpacking their agendas and what they need to do, because they will not work alone. You cannot execute that task alone. They will have technical experts around them who will guide the technical processes. And once we see how they ensure that this input from technical processes are incorporated, we may be able to see that that change may come. Again, I say that for me, the beauty is that they inspire in me, and I think in many Kenyans as well, some knowing already, some not knowing, but with time I'm sure we'll realize it. They inspire the belief that we will be able to talk about these issues without dividing ourselves further. We will be able to say that I do not want a three-tier system of governance because I think this, and they will be able to get me in my not wanting that three-tier to be able to sit back and think about why I don't want that three-tier. And when I say that I want a three-tier system of government, then they will be able to get me to sit back and think about why I can understand why somebody would question that. Where would be the potential loopholes in that? So for me, that is the beauty of it, that we may actually be able to discuss some of these emotive issues without it breaking down or degenerating, but the talks being sustained.
Are we putting the cart in front of the horse when we begin thinking that, oh, this member committee is tasked with coming up with structures that are going to come up with positions for political rewards? Aren't we just being speculative, Millie?
We are, but then we must also remember that the handshake came with a document that was signed. And one of the things that was stated in that document was electoral justice being dictated. And we know that for electoral justice to happen, there must be some kind of reform. We already discussed it as a nation from the date of the handshake. We all said there must be something done around that. Will it be IEBC going home? Will it be IEBC being restructured?
So the best thing for now is to say we look forward to electoral reform.
Yes.
We shouldn't be looking forward to do a premier position.
No.
We
wouldn't know.
We wouldn't know.
We wouldn't
know.
In
all fairness.
No.
We wouldn't know. But then they've got a 9-point agenda that they need to consider. And their first meeting is this week. Areas of consideration, areas of priority, where should they start, in all sincerity?
Justice. I am afraid that they have to think about how we will deal with this issue of impunity, of actions of people doing certain things that nothing happens. Let me give an example. Recently, we had 3 commissioners allegedly resign. And it was breaking news, and it was being discussed everywhere that IEBC commissioners have resigned after the fact. Because when they were being asked to resign, they said they were staying put. Now, when no one is asking them to resign, they decided to resign. Now, when these 3 commissioners resigned, subsequent to that, we have had discussions, including the chairman presenting himself before a committee, and that's a serious process, and saying that these people have not actually resigned. As far as is concerned, they still continue to enjoy certain perks. They have not returned certain things. I mean, this kind of impunity, if these people wanted to resign and they were unhappy with it, and we need to move forward. Now, we are put in a circumstance where you're discussing, is IEBC properly constituted? Yes, according to the constitution, perhaps. We say minimum is 3, maximum is 9. Yeah. According to their laws, which can be amended easily, quorum is 5. Can these people who are enjoying perks and have resigned by way of media, can they be forced to, or can they be forced to form the quorum? Can they be required to do certain things? I mean, there are all these questions that then you're left with. Should we need the IEBC to conduct certain processes now? That how do you deal with these people who sit there and you don't know whether they sit there or they don't sit there, and how that impacts on what action you're to take in ensuring that that institution works. So we must deal with impunity. I think that it is important for us to clearly identify, starting with those who cost us 1 year. Yeah. Yes, starting with those who cost us 1 year and cost us to go through a lot of heartache as a nation, and cost us to almost tip over as a nation until people were sure that there may be no Kenya. And remember the talk of the United Republic of Kenya and the Kenya, you know, became so common. Now you can see we are struggling. I am struggling to remember what the names were. Those days we knew them very well. You could cite them all the time. You know? So it is important that those people are held accountable. I think that that must be a starting point. If they don't start there and start by brushing things under the carpet and dealing with how do we do this and that without acknowledging that there are people who have done certain things and they have to be dealt with, then I think that it will leave a bad taste in many people's mouths.
It takes me back somewhere, Millie.
Yes.
It takes me back to the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation
Yes.
Commission. The intention almost similar, the circumstances a bit different, but the nation is still the same. And by some large extent, the issues too remain to be largely the same. What can we do? What can this 14-member committee do to avoid, you know, using an old map to find new lands?
Well, I think that you can't avoid that completely. Fact being that, leave alone even the TJRC process, even the Ndungu report, land is such an emotive issue in this country. Access to land, fear of people being displaced because of political instability of a land that they have acquired in proper circumstances, but could be said to be questionable circumstances when you look deeper into the truth justice process. We have the Ndungu report that has dealt with all these issues and made certain recommendations, for example. We have the TJRC part. We know that the land section in the TJRC report was tampered with. We know that there were certain changes made. So other processes, other political histories that they looked into could be taken, and the land aspect left out, with the Ndungu report being picked up to fill that land section, and then finding the way forward. When it comes to our other governance structures, we even had an audit in the life of the 11th Parliament that was conducted under the Office of the Auditor General that already stated what was felt by that audit team that was excessive in as far as managing our current governance structure is concerned, and what needs to be done, what needs to be addressed. How would you be able to address that? There are all these things and suggestions on way forward. So I think that the team's work would be to synthesize and to synchronize these different reports, these different informations, and find viable solutions. We have the perfect constitution that we talked of, almost perfect. The Bomas constitution that came out, but had to be mutilated because of political interests, that had been discussed and thrashed out and had a lot of input. We have all these things, and it would just be for them to remind us. Of course, some of them, situations may have changed, because, for example, even with devolution, we felt that devolution may not have been the best thing for us then. But now, everybody feels devolution is the thing, you know. So it would be important for us, with hindsight, now be able to, the benefit of hindsight, be able to look at these reports and discuss key issues that we think need to be discussed in as far as the proposed implementations were then, that we wanted to adopt maybe 5-6 years ago, and where we need to tweak it in order for us to be able to move the agenda forward. Now, I think that if they started from the premise that we want to find out what the problem is, then we are never going to get anywhere. Because we all know, I think even children in high school know what the problems in this country are. We all know what are the potential solutions. Now, what we need to do is to merge those solutions and find the best working solution for now. But to start from discussions would be taking us back 50 steps.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's not boardroom, hotel, plenary kind
Hopefully
of approach.
Not. Yeah.
It has got to be as devolved and as decentralized as it can get. It just needs to get to the grassroots.
Yes.
Because Nairobi hapa na Mombasa, Kisumu retreat, haitasaidia sana.
No.
Haitasaidia sana.
No.
However, Millie, you mentioned the Constitution, and there's been a lot of reference to this document, especially recently. We need to relook at amendments, maybe in certain sections, in certain areas, to help us realize a certain greater vision for this nation. In your view, should we go into touching the Constitution? What amendments should we be thinking of right now as Kenya grows beyond 50?
We must touch the Constitution, in my opinion. We must. The fear of touching the Constitution has cost us. I will go back to the gender rule. When discussions were going on about implementing the gender rule, some of the most viable and most, in many people's opinions, sensible solutions required that we change our representation. There was this famous suggestion, for example, that you reduce the number of constituencies and have each constituency represented by a man and a woman. Then you don't need to go into the gender thing, because it will be 50-50. So if we have like 110 constituencies and you have 220 MPs coming in, we will have even reduced the number of legislators from the 350 almost that we have in the National Assembly right now, and reduced it to something a lot more manageable for the nation. But then, even with those, why they were not seen as viable options then was that the executive then did not want to hear anything about touching the Constitution. Anything that required a constitutional amendment was a no-no.
Don't go there.
When it came to outside Parliament, though many Kenyans were happy with the thought of the Constitution, there were certain actors who were not happy. For example, even amongst the gender actors, many were worried that if you go for that amendment, you may actually lose the gains that we have gained thus far. Now, we have realized that that fear is taking us down a wrong road. So we must sit and seriously think about how we want to resolve these problems. Remember that I think across the country, in 2010 when we were passing the constitution, it was agreed by those who were saying yes and those who were saying no. The no people were saying, we agree it is an improvement. But hii shida hii, why can't we tatua hii shida? Because if we have it there, it will be a problem to deal with it after the fact. The people who are saying yes were saying, we agree that there's like a small shida. But we are saying, let this process culminate finally. Yeah.
Iyo maneno tutaangalia afterwards.
Yes. So even then, when we passed that constitution, as a nation, we were aware that there were certain aspects of the constitution that we needed to be able to relook at if we were to have the almost perfect document that we wanted. So let us now bite that bullet. We have seen where it took us almost two last year and to the beginning of this year. I don't think that any serious Kenyan and anyone who has dealt with refugees and seen the desperate situation that lacking a country can take you to would want Kenya to go down that road. So I think the important thing would be to discuss in sober tones without drawing emotions, where people are able to discuss. I'll tell you again, one of the things when we're discussing like over the gender rule was some of the MPs would say, and I've even had some of them say now, that why don't we, in fact, I would be very happy if we had more women, for example, come in. But then when you tell them, okay, can we take your constituency and give it to women? And no, that discussion ends there. So if we can draw the emotion out of it and have these discussions, and I hope this team of sober, serious leaders would be able to get us to have that discussions, being very careful to downplay the emotions. And I think that they will need very serious communicators, because information from the meetings and the sessions that they have will have to be managed. They will have to be properly managed to ensure that they are not released in a manner that it becomes emotive.
Yeah, you say that right. I thought I would say it, but they would say I'm looking for a job. So they would say I'm looking for a job. So thank God that it has come from you. That managing information from those particular sessions is very important.
It is very important.
Everything counts. Punctuation, comma, everything,
you know,
to the detail.
Yes.
Because therein lies the devil.
Yes.
It's in the detail.
Yes.
However, Secretary General, Orange Democratic Movement Party, Edwin Sifuna, says ODM is to go for a 2-day retreat this week. And the key agenda will be looking into how ODM fits in the current political situation. How ODM can complement the handshake and help assist this nation moving forward. This is the same gentleman who said he's tired of walking on his knees. But, but merely, fair enough, they're having that retreat.
Yes.
What if we were to give consultancy 101 for free, politically speaking, on this this morning? What would we tell ODM as they go for this retreat and as they embrace the agenda, the noble agenda they have in mind?
I think that it is a good thing that ODM is going to discuss that. One of the things that you will agree that when you're looking at some of these political parties with structures to the ground, political parties that can quickly whip up a meeting, a group of people, a rally, in any part of the country or in most parts of the country, a few. And ODM is one of those organizations. So it would be important for them to have a clear agenda amongst themselves as ODM as to what they think. But of course, with the talks and in the spirit of the handshake, where we have still yet to talk, it would be very foolhardy of them to come with a hard stand that this is the ODM stand, this is what we want. It would be good for them to have a clear agenda of what are the gains that that proposed structure that or amendments that they have in mind would bring to this country, and also begin to look at what are the potential pitfalls of that structures or the hurdles and how they propose it can be addressed. I'm asking them to do a lot more. Why? Because remember, one of the things that we consistently said during the 11th Parliament was we want the opposition, they keep telling us this is wrong, can they offer an alternative? And they said our alternatives will be given when we are in government. Now they are almost there. They are in Parliament. Yes.
They're actually there.
And the handshake has happened. So any alternative that they propose or any suggestion that they present should also show the pros and cons.
And cons, yeah.
And why the pros outweigh the cons, so that we will be aware of it and potentially then give room to those, because there are many actors here who may not have a stand either way, but would be able to see or think, a think tank, so to speak, to think about how you'd address those cons, so that we're already thinking about it beforehand, that this is likely to present a hurdle and this is how we are likely to deal with it, so that if the hurdle occurs, or when the hurdle arises, it will not be so huge that we cannot climb over it and the country will go down the wrong road again. So it would be useful for them to come out with this, rather than just their political normal stands and talks in rallies where they excite emotion and get us to take a stand which we don't understand, we can't comprehend, but we will say, Baba has said or Mama has said, therefore this is it. It would be important for them to also do a lot more of these technical sessions, where they give us the pros and cons of these things, so that we can discuss them. And give out information that Kenyans who engage a lot in social media can discuss in social media, rather than just the emotions of, no, it is this, and if you're not against it, you're a mole or you're a what, or, you know, that kind of discussion.
Millie Lwanga, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
We've come to the close of this show this morning. And of course, in the spirit of the handshake, it's very important, very, very important that we wind up at that note. But of course, a lot has been discussed on this set. We do hope that your take home from this discussion will be something that can inform the decisions you make, the commentary you have in offices, at home, along the streets, as far as politics is concerned in this country. Kindly keep it sober, keep it sane, keep it rational, and most importantly, keep it informed, all right? My name is Samuel Njoroge. Have a fantastic day ahead. Brenda Zeda Radido will be driving the next hour. As far as I'm concerned, it's a wrap, and see you tomorrow for yet another exciting edition of Good Morning Kenya.